Welcome back, everyone, to Frontlines and Faultlines with Mike Kelly. Great to have you back with us. And we have a special treat for you over these next couple of programs because we have with us today former Chief of the Defence Force and Air Chief Marshal Mark Binskin AC, who's had a magnificent career in the Defence Force, served this nation so well over many years, not only in uniform, but also ever since he so-called retired.
Retired.
I think he's probably been busier as a retired person than he was in uniform. But the nation has benefited so much from his experience and from his passion for serving the country. So it's a really fantastic opportunity for us to engage in a conversation with Mark about a number of things from his time, because even today we're engaging in so many debates as we have with our conversations to date on issues around laws of armed conflict targeting, how the defence and the nation can be more resilient for future conflicts. So in that context, we're going to need a lot of conversations, I think, with Mark. So thanks for being with us today, Mark. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the invitation. It's good to catch up.
No worries. Well, look, in particular, we know that you sort of started life flying Skyhawks in the Navy and then moved over to Air Force once they decommissioned the fixed wing capability in Navy. But in your time, you had two particularly, I think, relevant experiences for a lot of the things we've been talking about, which one was as Chief of Staff at Headquarters Australian Theatre, where we were both working together and dealing with targeting issues in the Iraq War.
And chasing down Korean freighters, I think, from
yes,
memory on a Sunday morning. That's right.
Pong Su or whatever.
That's the one.
That thing, And then also, particularly after that, you then were the first non-US person to take over as the director of the US Air Force Center for Combined Air and Space Ops. And so you were actually in charge of the entire air war, basically, in Iraq.
Oh, director, not commanding, but the director of the CAOC, and that manages the air war.
Yeah. So you've had experience very few Australian service people will have ever had at a very high level of conventional operations targeting, etc. And so it would be great to unpack that a bit today, but also for future conversations, you're also head of the Royal Commission on those major disasters we had in 2019-20. Very traumatising, as I know.
It was a National Natural Disaster Response Royal Commission. Yeah.
No, that was a tremendous endeavour that you engaged in. That there's a lot to unpack with that. So these conversations are going to be fascinating.
Okay.
But yeah, look, so, how did you end up joining the Defence Force in the first place back in 1978?
Yeah, boy, that goes back a long way. I'd always, none of my family had been in the Defence Force in recent times. I'd actually had great uncles that were in the First World War, which I only discovered when I was CDF going across and visiting.
Right.
But I always had a love of aviation. My dad had trained as a pilot, private pilot, then got married, and then kids and mortgages and all that sort of come. But then he was always trying to finish off his pilot's license, so it wouldn't be uncommon to be sitting in the back seat of a Cessna 172 at Canberra doing night circuits just to do that. So he got his hours up.
Right.
But we would always go to air shows, and back then there were some good air shows. Nowra had a couple of air shows, and you got a chance to see A4s and the like doing that. And I think it was the silver anniversary of Air Force, that's 50 years. So there was a Richmond Air Show and sort of Mirages and F4 Phantoms and the like. So I always had that in my blood. And I remember as a young kid, a couple of Mirages roaring over the house at Campbelltown.
Right.
Either lost or doing a fly past, I'm not sure back then, but it was just to see the two aircraft at a couple of 100 feet. We lived on a hill. Go past and look at that. It was always something that got the blood flowing. Always made models, always did that. And then in my early teens, I discovered I had some hand-eye coordination for fast things. I raced dirt bikes and the like. And thrill seeker. There you go. But it's one of those ones when you do it and you're racing, you get into a mode where it just flows, and it's the same when you're flying. So I really enjoyed that, and didn't do anything extremely well at school.
Right.
But had some very good teachers that helped me get through. And then first chance I had when I got out of school, applied for the Air Force and the Navy, and
Right.
you go into recruiting, and they were trying to get me into the academy, and I said, I don't want to go in the academy, I just want to go direct entry. And I remember the recruiting officer said, all right then, bottom drawer, and here's the application for direct entry.
Right.
And applied for both and went through the process for both, and got accepted to Navy first, and the next day Air Force. But I went with my heart, and
Right.
and I'd always sort of thought about carrier aviation and
Right.
and the like. And the A4s were always a great jet that got me as a kid. So
Yeah,
I just went with my heart, and that was
to have
where I went.
one of those as well. For
Yeah,
sure. So I guess it was a question of, to coin a phrase, you felt the need for speed.
Need for speed. That's exactly right. Little did I know what I was getting myself into, but yeah, it was. And the rest is history, really. But I joined just expecting to be an aviator in the Fleet Air Arm and retire as a crusty lieutenant commander in the wardroom at now, because that's what aviators did in the Fleet Air Arm. Back then, most people stayed in that area, and unless you wanted to drive a ship or whatever and get your watchkeeping certificate and all that, chances were you weren't going to progress much above a commander or a captain. Yeah.
Right. And then when you transferred the Air Force, I think you were telling me that DVA were rejecting some of your service background.
Later on in life.
Had no record of your time in the Navy.
Yeah, I'll go to the DVA store. I went online to enter my details in that last couple of months of CDF, and you put in your PM keys number and your date of entry into service, and it kept coming back and saying you're not recognised. I went, I'm pretty sure I'm on the system. And what it was my Navy service had not been recognised in PM keys when they did the digital transfer. I think it was back in the 90s or the 2000s. So there was one area there that showed I'd been in, and I went back and adjusted all, and it was all good after that. But yeah.
Yeah, I was very pleased to see that there's stuff ups that even applied to the CDF.
That's it.
Not just for, diggers and the rest of us. I had the same problem that when they did that transfer, they mistyped one letter of my name, and
that was it.
Didn't exist.
And I have to say, I could see how to be hard. If you're a Corporal Smith and trying to get through and into the system, but I deliberately didn't push contacts or whatever. I tried to let the system work, and in the end got a phone call from a lovely lady in Queensland who was responding to all this, and we worked it through, and she said, I think I know what the problem is, and it was all resolved, but it took a little bit to do it.
Yeah, with fossils like us,
that's it. You got to dig back
through the hydraulic stuff and the coffee stained docks and all that.
Yeah, get the scrolls, and your name is here on the list. That's it. Yeah.
Well, that was you ended up flying just about everything we've ever had. It's sort of you had from the Skyhawks to Mirage 3s, and
so I was lucky. I did pilot's course with Air Force, as you do in the Navy. Was lucky to get A4s off pilot's course. Flew them for a couple of years. Did a day deck qual in the A4, which was something else. I mean, you want to get the adrenaline flowing, putting a jet onto what was the smallest deck at the time. As a 20-year-old, I wouldn't trust my kid to drive my car as a 20-year-old. The boys, look after the car, but here's the government letting me go out and land a jet on a ship. But it showed me how when you're trained to do something and people understand the risks and put the controls in place and work you up, what you can actually let your people do. And that came in handy later life as CDF, when I sort of thought back to early days of what we could do. And I mean, we had different risk tolerances back then, but we still trained people to be able to do it. So I flew A4s for a couple of years, and then an exchange started, believe it or not. We'd flown A4s in the Navy for a number of years. We'd flown Mirages for a number of years, but there had never been an exchange between Navy and Air Force, which I thought was ludicrous. But an opportunity came up to go and fly with the Air Force and fly Mirages, and so I went and did that, always with the intent of doing that and going back to A4s and taking that experience that I had. While I was there, I looked at trying to do the fighter combat instructor course with Air Force and take that skill set back as a air warfare instructor in the Fleet Air Arm. But after about a year there, a new government got in, And you may remember it was just after the Falkland War.
Yes.
We had HMS Invincible was going to become HMAS Australia.
Yeah. Didn't happen.
It didn't happen, and they retired the Melbourne and basically phased out the fixed wing component of the fleet air arm. So most of my contemporaries went to the Royal Navy and continued on flying Sea Harriers.
Okay.
I was already with Air Force, so I just I elected to jump across. I was comfortable in the Mirage. I was comfortable with the systems in that. But it wasn't that easy.
Right.
Back then, rather than do a transfer, I had to actually go back through recruiting. So I had to put a recruiting paperwork in again. And I remember we were at a pitch black exercise. I think we're in Darwin when I got the message back. And it was sent from Williamtown up to Darwin, and I got the response, and it went along the lines of, at the moment, there's no vacancies for people of your qualifications. It wasn't quite the wording, but basically it was you're on pause, and don't call us, we'll call you, which I handed to the commanding officer at the time, and he looked at it and said, this is crazy, and I thought he'd screwed it up and thrown it away, and I think that was the copy he had. He said, leave it with me, and it took a few more months. But by February, what are we looking at now? By February '84, so about 6 months after all that happened, I was one day I was a sub-lieutenant, the next day I was a flying officer.
Right.
But in subsequent life, I was the commanding officer of that squadron, and the admin cell were in cleaning out the archives, and I heard this, look at this. And one of them came into the office and said, you really need to read this, boss. And I read it, and it was the original letter that was sent to the squadron. So that's now in my archives.
Oh, brilliant.
Somewhere. But I, through all that, I changed over, and that was when I was on fighter combat instructor course, came off fighter combat instructor course, and selected in the first cadre to go to Lemoore in the United States to train on F-18. So there were 6 of us.
Right.
Plus one other pilot, Barry Kelly, who was off to fly with the Marines, and he and I were on pilot's course together.
Right.
And so we trained up, brought the jets back, did the conversion unit.
Right.
Then to 77 Squadron as the fighter combat instructor, and then selected to go to the US on exchange flying F-16s for a couple of years, and that was just a brilliant 3 years over there. Right. So yeah, I've had a blessed career with different aircraft. All of them fantastic airplanes.
Yeah, living history here.
Yeah, there's a lot of history.
Did you ever get your hands on a control stick for a JSF or?
No, I didn't. Only the simulator. They're only single seat. But I did fly Super Hornets. I did a quick check in the Super Hornet, which is just bigger Hornet. And I was lucky enough. 3 weeks before I retired as CDF, I went back to Williamtown. And jumped in the front seat with a good mate who was an instructor in the back seat, and another good friend who was also one of my staff officers in one of the jobs in the other jet. And we just did 2 aircraft out across the Tasman Sea, and some 1v1 and some Go Supersonic for the last time, and ride back and land. And
because you could.
It was great. It was. It's amazing how it all comes back. It really is.
Right. Muscle memory.
It is muscle memory. I remember the pilot I was with, he said, we're going to do a full afterburner formation takeoff. And I looked at him and said, Sam, I haven't done that for a while. I said, you'll be right. And it was just all came back. So
that's amazing.
Again, you go back to your training and the way we progress people through the system, and the way we look at working people up and all that. And it does, it just comes back. Yeah.
And then you sort of stewarded our, I guess, having to ramp up to actually being at the sharp end of air campaigns, and in particular in the Gulf.
Yeah. And
I think, trolling forward to when you were Chief of Staff at Headquarters AST, and, we had an interesting situation there, of course, because we're signed up to a bunch of stuff that the US isn't signed up for, and we were in terms of Operation Iraqi Freedom, as it was called, in 2003, it was really 3 nations primarily involved in that manoeuvre phase, with the UK as well. And so the UK and Australia were in this corner of having signed up to like additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Convention. So we had to work out that relationship with the US. And there's a famous shorthand description for that, which was like the national red card system. So could you explain what that was about?
Yeah, we learned a lot in 2003, which subsequently took through to 15, 16 when we went back into the Middle East, but with aircraft. But 2003, we'd learned a lot. We hadn't been in air operations with kinetic effects for a long, long time. Vietnam War, in the last time. And fighters, the last time we deployed fighters was Korea. So we were relearning targeting policy, targeting directives, targeting boards, and the like. And so that was, and it was also early on for AST, Australian Theatre. So there was a lot of news early on. But again, everyone sort of stepped through it really well. We had some good legal advice on what you can and can't do and the bounds and where the traps for young players were as we stepped through. And then in the KAOC, made sure we had a very good air component team there, and then they knew their bounds. They knew what our rules of engagement were and what was different to the rules of engagement of the US and the UK for that matter, because each nation had their sovereign rules of engagement. And a lot of them aren't different. A lot of them are the same, but the art is knowing what's different and then how that applies. And then having someone in the KAOC that's the red card holder.
So the KAOC's the Combined Air
and Operations Centre. So someone that's there with the red card, so that if it looked like an Australian aircraft was going to get tasked with something would take us outside of our agreed rules of engagement or approved rules of engagement, then the red card would come out. And the red card rarely gets played because most of the time through the tasking and approval process, you don't actually have to play a red card because everyone has a bit of common sense in how they approach it. But occasionally the red card has to be played. And so, no, we can't do that. And that's normally in the time-sensitive dynamic targeting. The aircraft are already airborne. Everyone's looking around to see who can go and do a task, and the aircraft start to get tasked. And as you look at the targeting, you start to do the collateral damage estimate in real time as they're going on station, even to the point of the pilot or weapon system operator later on. But pilot in the cockpit looking at something, going, oh, actually that's not within our approvals. They can play the red card. So anyone in the line can play a red card, but again, it's rarely had to be played, even though it's talked about it. I only know a couple of occasions where it was ever played.
And my memory too was that whenever UK or Australia, we were usually aligned. We had similar constraints, and so we'd usually be on a sort of unity ticket when you played a red card scenario. The American approach in Operation Iraqi Freedom was to sort of basically cut their sail to our positions. Is that your memory? Were there any issues where that wasn't resolved and the Americans just went ahead and did it themselves? Or
no, I don't think there was none that I can remember where they went ahead. There might have been a couple where they decided that they would operate under their rules of engagement. But if it was pre-planned, that would go right back in the original tasking. In the CDE side of it, from a dynamic tasking point of view, nothing came up back then that jumped out at me that wouldn't have been resolved just through the normal processes. But I think the art when you're in those roles, and I learnt this when I was back in the Air and Space Operations Centre as a director, is don't assume everyone thinks the same, and it's actually understanding the differences in. It's just not even the rules; it's the differences in the culture, the rules of engagement, and the targeting authorities. Not the similarities, because it's the differences that you really get yourself into trouble with.
Best to understand that beforehand and exercise it regularly.
Right. No, it is. That's exactly right. And if people understand the broad areas where you're the same and the differences, again, you rarely get to a point where you're going to get into that red card area. Yeah.
What impressed me too at that time was the Americans had introduced a software approach to analysing and developing their deliberative targeting. And they called it the fast CD. So it really enabled you to factor in all the dimensions of targeting. So issues around, the angle of attack, the ordnance, the nature of the structures on the ground, that what we knew about civilian presence, the weather, et cetera, and to do it in really quick processing time. Was that your first experience of hearing of that software at the time?
No, I'd heard about it before, because we were Air Command were talking about getting similar systems, and I can't remember where we're at that. But it became far more sophisticated during 2003. It was 91 where the air war in Iraq first brought a lot of this planning together and all that. And so 2003 was a bit of a carry-on from that. But it showed the sophistication of where we developed over a number of years of it's not just the weapon and matching the weapon to the target. It's understanding the collateral damage implications and how you manage them. So you can then use fusing or weapon size or attack directions and the like. And you had the ability to run those different options through quite quickly, and it would show you something. I think it was bug splat.
Bug splat
was what it would show you.
And description
Description, because it looked like someone had squashed a bug, but it showed you where the frag patterns were predicted to go
and stuff.
Then obviously there's still an art in this, because the thing about precise weapons is when they miss precisely. So that's all based on the fact that the weapon's going to hit exactly where you designate it. So then there's a bit of an art in there as well, even when you're doing the approvals. And so collateral damage estimates and the like don't guarantee that there's not going to be collateral damage. They just, what you're doing is you're aiming to minimize the risk of that collateral damage.
Right. And the Americans, so we'd never experienced that, before I'd sort of hit that situation of having those tools available. Did we learn the lesson from that acquiring those kind of tools, or did it take a long time to sort of understand it?
I would say that we're probably still playing catch up today in some way. We have access to the systems, but the actual acquisition and the like of the most up-to-date systems and all that are always areas that, when you end up in budgetary constraints, are the bits that always get delayed. So whenever we're in a KOC and we're in those operations, I'm pretty confident we got access to everything. In peacetime and the like, working up for it, we might actually be a bit behind.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where we are at the moment, but that, in my mind, is sort of where we sit.
Yeah, it always amazes me that we don't actually consider those things like vital investments up front.
I actually think they're a core investment because they're core to your capability. But unfortunately, a lot of times they're not the sexiest announceable out there, and so sometimes they're the programs that take the hits in delays and the like when the leadership, defence leadership, have got to find money to be able to invest in some of the other capabilities. Yeah.
And of course, you then have this situation where you've got a key coalition partner, and our central defence relationship with the US, for example, and now the extent to which those processes and systems have become so much more sophisticated with this, like the JADC2 environment, Joint All-Domain Command and Control, and intense sort of technological improvements on that whole targeting regime. You've really got to be able to seamlessly integrate with that, haven't you?
Yeah, you do. This is where I'd back our people, because our people are pretty well trained in systems, and I've seen people step into a KOC and step into the role, and within a day or two they've picked it all up. Because they've got the mindset and the processes, and they understand the philosophies behind it all. All they're doing then is actually getting on a piece of equipment and working it. So it is hard when we send our people in, but very quickly they pick it up, and quite often they're running it by the time they leave. So it is hard. I'm not sure we'll ever be right at the bleeding edge of some of those technologies.
Right.
But our people are.
Right. Yeah. So the digital natives catch up pretty quick.
They catch up pretty quick. It does, and again, that makes it hard for them when they go into the roles. But I watch them step in, and I watch them step up to the plate pretty quick.
Right. Yeah. I guess the issue is then when it all becomes very systematized, and how do our systems plug into that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it is a new world for that. And you look at the investment we have in our major platforms. People don't realise the investment that has to go in those supporting elements and supporting systems and all that. It is a huge investment.
Right. We might come back to that too. But coming back to the processes in Operation Iraqi Freedom, part of that fast CD bug splat system was too, there was you got an estimation of what the civilian casualties might be or collateral damage. And there was a kind of an escalatory authority chain of command type approach to that. Can you explain how that worked?
Yeah, and I won't go into what the numbers were. I've got a good memory, I think, of what they were. But you're right. There are certain collateral damage and non-combatant casualty. Non-combatant. I can't remember what the acronym was. It's changed over the years, but non-combatant estimate. And so there were a number. Again, when you went through that process, it gave you the risk of civilian casualties. Let's just put it that, non-combatant casualties.
Right.
Not the fact that there would be, but there's a risk of. And you had thresholds based on numbers there. And so some thresholds were the KOC commander, other thresholds were the air component commander, other thresholds might come back to being Chief of Joint Operations,
right,
or CDF, or the government,
right,
and it depends on the severity of those. And as CDF, I ended up with a number of these when we were back in 2015 to 2017. Where you'd always talk to people when they bring it and say, okay, so that's the potential risk. What's the military advantage of hitting this target? Because you needed to understand not just the risk, but was there a good military reason to do this, and what was the advantage, and what would that give us to be able to then make those decisions on the approvals, or whether to go to government.
Right. And on the US side, some of those decisions would be reserved all the way to the president.
All the way to POTUS. That's exactly right. Now, it's and a lot of the times it's the military value or the benefit might outweigh the potential risk, and it might be Osama bin Laden is sitting in a cafe somewhere in a town. Well, that people might, for the fact that might end the war right there, right then. Even though it might be a POTUS call, they may well go with that approval. Or here it might be a government call and go with that approval based on the potential military outcome.
Right.
For
really high value
or strategic
target.
outcome. Yeah, and high value targets, and that's right. That's another one in there. Yeah.
Well, you can basically cripple the command and control.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Maybe bring things to an earlier conclusion.
Yeah, and that's the one shot that you might have at that person. So you've got to weigh all that up.
Right.
And as someone that's in that authority chain, you have to get across all those ins and outs before you can then go to the next level. Because it's not one of these take it or leave it when you put it up. I mean, real lives are at stake here, not just lives of the potential non-combatants around the place, but lives potentially of your people or your own civilians, if actually that decision is not taken to do it. So you've got to weigh all that up, and so you've got to understand all those factors if you're going to make the decision, or if you're then going to take that to the next level for approval.
Right, and it always seemed to me also to match military logic. We have these principles of war, and one of them is economy of effort. And if you're using precision-guided munitions, they ain't cheap.
No, they're not. But they're not cheap in a way, but people rely on them more and more because the community expectation, national expectation is you're always going to minimise the risk of non-combatants in an operation. So it immediately becomes expensive. Even though you could put an unguided bomb, a dumb bomb, within maybe 50 metres or 20 metres of the target, that's not accurate enough when you're doing some of these assessments and the like. And so, there's a lot that goes through your mind. And I always said to people who are above me, and even later on with the government, I will never bring something to you that I wouldn't approve myself.
Right.
So it's just that I can't approve it because of the authorities, but I would go down, I would not just pass it and go, it's your call. I would always make sure I had a really good look at it one way or the other and had a good discussion on the benefits versus the risk before we then went
Be
for it.
personally satisfied and
Correct.
interrogate it.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
Which is, a sound example of command responsibility.
it is.
In effect.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So, and that's, I think we mentioned in a previous program, we kind of made a rod for our back in the first Gulf War. We showed all this sexy footage of PGMs. And but about 88% of the munitions were dumb stuff still then, and so it's and you're right, the public expectation increase, but it sort of takes you beyond what the legal constraints are. I mean, people we talked about laws of armed conflict, meaning it doesn't eliminate the fact of potential civilian casualties, but we try in the ADF to do the best we can. That's good.
And you always try to do the best you can. It's a lot of the times when we're going in and doing these operations, the general populace aren't a part of the regime that may be putting us at risk or oppressing their own people or trying to rule that particular part of the globe. So you want to do your best in there. But we actually haven't been in open warfare for a long time. And so this will be a huge moral issue if we ever end up in a no kidding high-end stoush. How much risk do we put our own people at to achieve a military aim when actually you've got those high-end peer threats that you're trying to maneuver against? It won't stop you doing all the process and the estimations and all that, and judging military advantage against the potential risk to non-combatants. But your threshold for those risks may go higher.
Right.
So threshold numbers may go higher. Yeah.
Look, that's all we've got time for this week. But next time we talk, we'll sort of dive down a bit deeper into the forward experiences in relation to the battle against ISIS, etc., and a lot to learn from that too. So thanks very much for giving us your background and the depth of experience that we're dealing with here. So look forward to talking with you more next week, and we'll be talking again with Mark and bring this to the end of his career in the Defence Force, and hopefully we talk about lessons learned. They're often lessons ignored, but hopefully there'll be some value in hearing more from Mark on that. So we'll see you again next week. Cheers.